Paulides, Canadian Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. And we're here with Huck. She's in the office, waking up from a nap, and she's right next to the Montana Con poster that October 7th and 8th. Oh, she's leaving now. Anyhow, it's October 7th and 8th. Actually, only October 8th now because the 7th is sold out. But we have an all-star lineup. Montana Con in Kalispell, Montana. And you definitely will want to get there. It's going to be the time of your life. And there's the QR code. Freeze that, put your phone on it. So, there we go. And this is a letters segment. So, and this is Mike's letter number 3. And I've been impressed with Mike. He's kind of taking us along the highway here. And away we go. The yard at our cabin is about 3/4 of an acre carved out of the forest. I built an outhouse in the 80s. I'd worked as a carpenter early on and enjoyed it. I'm known for overbuilding things. I'd replace the back garage door at home and use the older wooden door that had a window on the outhouse. I'd also built 2 deer feeders in the yard. One was a gable roof and the other was flat. The outhouse and feeders were framed with 2x4 and 4x4 and covered with 5x8 flat plywood and fastened with construction screws. Very solid. One day I arrived there, and as I slowly drove into the yard, I noticed the feeder with the flat top roof had no roof. I get out of my truck to walk over there while scanning the yard. Then I see the outhouse is open. At that time it was being used for storage. I'd bear hunted and had leftover boxes of bulk candy and cookies and molasses. I went there first. It was a panel door with mortised hinges. The vertical board with the hinges, called the stile, was still attached to the outhouse. The rest of the door was pulled apart from that stile, exposing the dowels and dowel joints, and was laying on the ground. The window was out of the door but not broken. The door had been padlocked to the outhouse and the lock hasp had been pulled off the outhouse, screws still on the screw holes. The outhouse was empty. My road is gated and locked and it had not been disturbed. I walk over to the feeder. The top was a 4x4 piece of plywood screwed on and flush with the frame. No overlap to grab onto, yet it was pulled off, leaving the screws in the plywood. If you used a tool to tear it off, it would have to be a hammer and a pry bar. No damage or tool marks were there. I put all my scrap food into the roof when I leave, for whatever wants it. I stopped feeding the deer when chronic wasting disease hit. As I stood in the yard with my as usual question up there, what the heck, I saw something on the small trail opening into the woods next to the outhouse. All the bear bait boxes were strewn around the small area and all were empty, even some tools. A large kitchen knife, a hand pruner, and a limb pruner, and several gloves. I walked around picking up the trash and it hit me. Again, no scat, no remaining scraps, no teeth marks in the cardboard boxes. Red flag. Not in the woods where bait was eaten and not in the yard. I took a close look at the door and the feeder roof. No bite marks, no claw marks, no tool marks. Red flag. And why would a bear take the tools out of the trees? To this day, I have no idea how those materials were moved and leaving no real damage. More like it was disassembled. I actually could have just reassembled the feeder and door. I had to imagine a big smart bear, but that just didn't explain it. This was in the mid-90s. My son does the snow removal and I do all the grass and brush cutting. 3 years ago, while he was blowing snow, he kept seeing what he called a large jet black dog with red eyes on the yard perimeter. He'd see it here, look away, and then over there, look away, and then over there, watching him plow. He said it didn't run from place to place, it just appeared somewhere else, though he didn't see it disappear and reappear. But it didn't have time to get from one place to another without him having seen it running, yet it didn't. I asked him, are there more than one? He said he never saw more than one. This went on for hours, and it never approached him. Not docile, not aggressive. He didn't feel threatened. I said, "Are you sure it was a dog and not a wolf?" He wasn't sure. He never saw it again. Then last year in 2022, when he arrived, he pulled in and got out to lock the gates behind him at night. It was dark. In front of his truck in the headlights, he saw a white, upright, oval blob thing. Kind of like a tic-tac, vertical with 3 foot high, no features. Glide across the road just above the surface and keep going into the trees. Oddly, I saw what he described 25 years ago crossing the trail a mile and a half out on the old trail. I'd gotten off my ATV to follow it into the forest, but because I was alone up there as usual, I thought that wouldn't be prudent as it was dusk. I did look for tracks in the mud where it crossed, but there were none. Then also last year, while he plowed, he saw an old man in a fur hat, buckskin coat, buckskin boots with a musket. The old man stopped and looked at him in the eyes, but my son couldn't see his eyes. It was just a dark area where eyes should have been. Then the man looked away, walked off, and disappeared. Not disappeared from sight as in distance, but just faded away. I asked, did he leave tracks in the snow? No, he didn't. My son doesn't bullshit me. We have a pact about that. The man had no blaze orange on, which is required during all game seasons in Minnesota. And if he were human, he was trespassing and well into my property and aware we were there. Rifle deer hunting in Minnesota runs from the first weekend in November, coinciding with the whitetail rut, through the third weekend. My experience was November 14th, 15th, 16th, 2011. I went to my property to hunt. I was alone and planned on having a relaxing few days hunting on my property, not on state land. But for over 24 hours, I was unnerved by a series of events, a feeling that I am not familiar with, the strangest hours of my life to date. It was Friday night. I was in the trailer house in bed sleeping. I'm a light sleeper and sleep with one eye open. I was awakened by 3 a.m. by a whistle, directly outside opposite where my head was in bed, which is ultimately 5 feet off the ground on block footings, plus my bed height from the ground. It was not a bird. What or who knows, my head was right there. I sat up instinctively. Then it repeated. It was pretty similar, but not exactly like a wolf whistle a man would do when seeing a woman. It was long and drawn out, both times the same. The only bird that makes noise like that at night up there would be owl and geese, and that was no owl. I sat there listening. The trailer house is a 1962 12 by 55, walls about 3 inches thick, and little if any insulation is left. My property sits in the middle of a 2-mile stretch of only seasonal hunting properties, all off the grid, and past that there are just farms. Excluding mine, only 4 cabins or trailer houses in that 2-mile stretch. When I go up alone, I drive that 2-mile stretch to see who is there while I am there. 3 years ago, while in the cabin at night with my son, the door opened and a guy just walks in like he owns the place. Instantly, he was looking at a .45. It was a guy I used to know a mile down the road. Hadn't seen him in years and didn't recognize him until he said his name. I gave him my number and said, next time text me and I'll come open the gates. I don't want that to happen again. Back to the story. No one else was there. I do have a reputation up there based on my background and how long I've been there. So while I sat there, I kept telling myself no one in their right mind would walk down my driveway, 300 feet at 3 a.m. to screw with me. That would be very dangerous for them. No clue what to think. I was planning to get up at 4 a.m. and go out to hunt, but at that point I reconsidered. I never heard any footsteps approach or walk away or any other noises. I thought, get up and quietly go to the kitchen, lights off, make coffee, and just sit and listen. As it gets light, go out and hunt. Not knowing what it was, who it was, or why, I was a bit concerned. In my past work life, I've been threatened by several different groups for violent people at different times. So that is always in the back of my mind even today. Many of those evildoers who actually had sentences that had an end date are getting released now. I quietly made coffee and sat there. Where I sat, I was looking straight out a window, and there was a window immediately to my left. My rifle at my side in case a deer walked by the window. Wink. The trailer sits in the north end of my yard. It's 80 feet to the south tree line of my yard that I was facing. I I look at the woods and then a pond. The timber is 60 years old, give or take, so underbrush was then 6 to 7 feet tall. I know when it was last logged and who logged it. It's November, so leaves are all down. The south of the property past the brick tree line, as I said, is a beaver pond, so no timber, all open. There's beginning to be some light. The timber is all dark. So the pond is backlighting, and the timber where I can see through from the edge of the tree line to the siding is roughly 45 feet. So from my seat to the pond is roughly 130 feet max. Not a guess, I measured it. At the point I can see into the trees by then, the pond is well lit. But the sun is not up yet. There's a semi-clear area from beaver damage straight in my line of sight that was well lit, and I could see in and through there. There were 3 large aspens 10 feet apart. I can see between them clearly and over the underbrush. Pretty well there. I see movement which puts me on alert, and I see something. It's bipedal. No blaze orange, no cap, no discernible clothing, no color differentiations in the face, head, and shoulder colors. It's all the same. It appears to be sideways to me, and I'm seeing just the profile. It moves from the west aspen to the middle aspen. In that time, I am certain it is not a deer or a bear. The hair was strangely slanted, and there didn't appear to be a neck. I couldn't see arms or legs. Then it passed from the middle aspen to the east aspen, seemingly brushing the top of its head on a limb, but not ducking or moving off course as there was no light between the limb and the head. From there I could no longer see it as it was too dark in the woods and no longer in line with the pond. Heading in the direction of my stand. Well, I'm pretty much DEFCON 5, straining my brain. Total visual about 5 seconds. He needed a night vision device. It best resembled Harvey's sketch in Tribal Bigfoot, page 311 from Marlette Jackson. If you draw a line from the midpoint between the elbow and the bottom of the deltoid in that sketch to the head, that's what I could see. Even though lighting wasn't ideal and I was not right on top of the thing, the backlighting made it abundantly clear what it was and was not. As always, I grabbed my pen and notebook. About the same time, color matching exactly the trees and brush color, no visible clothing, certainly no blaze orange. It was very cold and no hat. Since this sighting was only a couple of hours since my rude awakening, I'm assuming what I heard whistle was what I saw. The head was not a human head shape. From where I was, I couldn't see a nose in the profile. The front of the head angled back, and the head appeared to be somewhat conical. Back on the head seemed to go straight down to the neck. Again, didn't see a neck, or a distinct neck. I know every inch of my property. It was on a deer trail with lots of underbrush to fight with while walking. I walk it frequently. I did not see arms or shoulders, as it always sideways to me. And its head did not move up or down or back or forth. It appeared to glide through the brush effortlessly. Key point. A lot of people who see a Bigfoot say it glides. It doesn't step. Step, step, step. No glides. It's almost like its feet are not on the ground. But there's just no way to move through there like that smoothly. You have to fight underbrush and down timber. Arms and shoulders and head should have been flailing and body twisting and turning. Uncharacteristic for me, I decided to wait until late morning to hunt. It was a clear sunny day in the 30s. At 10 a.m. I got up and went out, code red, hypervigilant. Got into my stand. I deer hunt by stalking or with deer calls, and I'm pretty successful calling deer to me. From my stand, there's an opening with little underbrush, roughly a quarter of an acre of openness and 75 feet from me and on the edge of the pond on the neighbor's property. I concentrate on that opening because I can see in there pretty clearly. It happens to be on my neighbor's property, but I know I can call deer, see there onto my property, and the neighbor does not hunt, and we are friendly. I scan all around as well, of course. I was using a doe bleat, fawn bleat, and grunt call. When I get bored in the stand, I sometimes go nuts on the calls like a deer on a crack. And that actually draws attention from deer, so I did that. I didn't hear any movement in the leaves, but suddenly I hear an intense, very loud deer snort. Wheezing began. I've heard these many times before as it's a warning vocalization, an alert. However, I've never heard one that intense and certainly not that loud. But it didn't stop there. The snort, then wheeze, with no break, morphed into the most blood-curdling woman's scream straight out of a horror movie. I could feel the sound waves in my face as if it were directed at me. The volume was intense. The hair on my neck stood up and I could feel goosebumps on my arms. Then it did it again. Identical. I was straining so hard to see because what I could hear, I could see precisely where it was coming from, but there was nothing there. Mike, you've got to get a night vision. Night vision, even FLIR would help you in this instance so much. You need to do that. It's open there, no obstructions. I couldn't reconcile this. I should be able to see the source because I am now looking at it. Both times while it was in progress, my eyes would zero in on the exact spot of the sounds and nothing was there. Anywhere in the vicinity. That scream had me completely unnerved. Over 60 years in the bush and I've never heard anything like it before or since. Then all of a sudden, not gradually, suddenly, it got dark. Really, really dark. Like a summertime severe thunderstorm dark. That does not happen here in the winter. It just doesn't. It started to snow like it was Armageddon. I could not see. Wet, heavy snow. It was so hard I cradled my rifle to keep snow off my scope and out of my face. Buried my head in my arms on the railing and I prayed. I actually thought this was something biblical. In roughly 5 minutes, over 4 inches fell. As quick as it started, it stopped. Instantly, and the sun was out like nothing happened. I looked up to see the back end of the storm and there was nothing in the sky except sunny, clear blue sky. What the heck? Yeah, what the heck? And aside, late summer before this, I had 4 bushels of apples that were too old to eat but good for wildlife. My wife and I dragged them out near the stand and dumped them in the low spot. A few weeks later, we walked out to look around. Every apple was gone. I was surprised. I've done this before and there's always some remaining on the ground. As we stood there my wife says, "Look up," and was pointing in the trees. Red dotted the canopy, dozens and dozens of apples in the notches of tree limbs. They were all over. I've watched both red and gray squirrels try to move apples around many times. Smaller ones are no problem, but larger ones present a problem. Especially to get them high up in the tree, it's nearly impossible. Perhaps there's now an explanation for that. Also, when baiting, I usually had 55-gallon drums of bait. I'd dig a pit and fill it with bait, then cut down trees or standing dead trees, stack them like Lincoln logs, pyramiding them upwards. I chose the heaviest I could find and had to move with a timberjack log roller and use all my strength and levers to get them stacked. Idea being that to make the bears work and stay there on the bait longer and keep scavengers out. Now I knew the bears could tear the structure open at any time, but what always baffled me was when these logs were 25 to 50 feet away, laying on top of the underbrush. It's as if they were thrown from up high. Moving them across the ground is one thing, but throwing them is quite another. And why? Why not just expose the bait and eat? And if they were angry the bait was covered? I think I know what was going on, but I digress. Friends, I'm telling you, I've read thousands of letters in the last few years. This one's the best. I thought, I don't want to get down onto the ground, but I had to and quickly made my way back to the trailer. My brain was buzzing, adrenaline flowing. All the windows in the trailer have curtains, but I never use them. That evening, I closed them. It was cold outside. The wet snow had frozen. In the center of the trailer's long back wall is a furnace, then a window, then a futon. I grabbed a book, a weapon, a flashlight, and laid down to read. I grabbed a book. Missing 411? Tribal Bigfoot? A short time later, it was like a gigantic hockey player hip-checked the back corner of the trailer. The whole thing shook laterally. I've never experienced an earthquake, but I consider that. Then I hear heavy, slow, thudding, crunching footsteps. I could feel them, bipedal, but as if they started by the heater, not by the back of the trailer. in what was wet snow, not frozen. Should have heard them at least several minutes earlier in the crunching snow while I had fallen while I was in the stand. My head was at the window edge of the wall. The crunching stopped right there, again immediately adjacent to my head. How did whatever it was know my head was right there? The curtain was closed. Totally unnerved then, again, because my head was right where whatever this was had stopped. It was definitely messing with me. I grabbed my weapon and waited. I yelled, "Whoever is out there, identify yourself right now. Messing with me like this could cost you your life. Who are you? I'll shoot you through the wall." I heard 2 more steps and thought, I've had enough. I'm not waiting for something to happen. I'll make it happen. With weapon in hand, I grabbed the flashlight and ran outside to the end of the trailer, in the dark in the direction of the steps. Nothing. No crunching in the snow, nor in the trees, no eye shine, no conclusive prints in the snow. It was too frozen. There's a 15-foot wide path behind the trailer before the tree line so we can drive around the trailer. Whatever it was didn't just step behind a tree in the dark. But then I was cheetah fast. No way these experiences were humans or animals. Neither moves invisibly or silently at times and loudly at others, and they can't just disappear. These experiences immersed me into the Bigfoot lore. 11 years later, I'm still searching for an explanation, but I already know what it really was in my soul. Because the only large animal that I know of that could possibly be in that area that screams is a cougar. I've heard them several times out west. I've listened to every big cat vocalization I can find, and it just does not fit. Not the same. And I would have seen it. None of these sounds are anywhere close enough. The fact that I could see where the sound was coming from and there was nothing there rules out all these. Yes, I did look up into the trees as well, having worked in the Southwest and the West. I know how big cats operate. Like I've told you before, cats lay up in the trees and jump down onto their prey. I was seeking Sasquatch at that point because of what it resembled. When I got home, I thought if there are ghost hunting groups all over, perhaps there are Bigfoot groups. Sure enough, one in Minnesota. I contacted them with what I saw. They replied and asked if I would agree to be interviewed. Absolutely. A guy called me, gave me his name, said he was a wildlife biologist with Minnesota DNR Forestry and working his wildlife biology degree and was doing work about 5 miles south of me and described his location. Later, I was able to verify that. I knew that area. It is very near where we saw the huge yellow ball of light in the night sky. Then he said he had seen some old gigantic tracks and he had a sighting of a cryptid and was investigating. It was a bit taken aback at a scientist having a sighting of a cryptid, as he described it. We talked a bit. Long story short, he got busy apparently and never followed up further with me. That was okay because just to hear he had a sighting so close to me made it validation. The tree I had my experience while bear hunting is just 2 miles from this location and 4 from the cabin. I thought I needed more information, specifically height. I brought my wife up there the next weekend. It was cold and sunny, and the ground was snow-covered, as was the underbrush. I told her I would walk her out to the spot where I had seen it, and all she had to do was stand there at the aspen trees and raise her arms. We had 2-way radios. She said, "Then what?" I said, "I'll be in the trailer watching and telling you what to do." She says, "So I'm going out there alone?" I said, "Yes, technically, but I'll be watching you." Boy, did I get the look. Yeah, Angie would have given me the look if I did that. Prior to this, I hadn't taken into account that the trailer was raised 3 feet on blocks, and right there I was sitting about 24 inches off the floor in a chair. Then my eye level another, 2 feet? So I sat down and waited. I couldn't see her. I called her and said, "Where are you?" She said, "Right where you left me." I said, "Raise both your arms and wave them." She did, and I still couldn't see her. Surprised, I started to understand what was going on. I'm sitting up high, looking straight out at the height over the underbrush. I said, "Wait there." I took a roll of orange trail marking ribbon, went to the woodpile, and grabbed an 8-foot 2x4. I tied ribbon to the top and 7-foot mark, and then the 6-foot mark. I brought it out and asked her to hold it. I went back and sat down. I could see the top of the ribbon on the 2x4, but it was not high enough. I asked her to hold it to the tree and raise it. When she got it to where I saw the thing appeared to be just under the limb, that was still there. I went out with a tape and took a measurement. 8 feet 10 inches. That, my friend, obviously rules out human or animal. Now, I spent a lot of time in British Columbia. British Columbia has huge Sasquatch, 10 to 12 feet. I think 8 foot 10 would probably be almost a small one in British Columbia. But usually in America, for some reason, they're smaller. October 14th, 2014. My son's cabin is built. Mine is under construction, and I'm doing it myself. We did both cabins ourselves. I was still staying in the trailer house until my cabin was ready. I was up there working on it. I took a break for lunch as it was raining. It had been all night. I just walked in and was preparing lunch. At that time, there was a pile of firewood on the tree line, 4 feet wide, 5 feet high, 10 feet long. I glanced up about the same window. At the left end of the woodpile closest to me, I see movement. At first glance, I think it's a deer, then I look away. But then immediately realize it's not, and I look back. It's the color of moss and vegetation in a cedar swamp, and looked as if it was draped with moss. I could see the rear half of it from the mid-abdomen area. I could not see a head, tail, or front half. The top of the rear hip is level with the top of the wood. Taller than a world record whitetail, still thinking it's a quadruped. But it looks deformed. It is moving very slowly as if grazing, or perhaps it's bent over to avoid detection by me and to get behind the woodpile. I just walked from the yard to the trailer, and I'd been checking my 6 effectively at the tree line. I would have seen it upright, or at least perhaps all of it. As it goes behind the woodpile, I realize it's not a quadruped, but it's a biped bent over 90 degrees. First leg joint knee in front like a human. That's why it looks so strange. I quickly moved 8 feet to the right to the next window to see it come out from the other side of the woodpile. It did not reappear. I said, not this time. I bolted outside to the woodpile like a cheetah. Maybe 15 seconds from my last sight of it, it was gone. It could only have gone south toward the pond, otherwise it would have been in the yard with me. As fast as I got there, I was thinking, I'm going to run right into it, physically, then what? Mid-October, 95% of the leaves are down there, and I could see from the woods to the pond, there was nothing. No crashing, no breaking, no brush, no splashing, no sighting of it, or anything moving. I thought there must be tracks here. Water was ponding on the ground. It had rained so much. It was soaked already, so I dropped to my knees and was crawling and feeling the ground where I saw it for depressions of feet of any kind. Nothing, no tracks. That thing had just vaporized into thin air. How many times I have heard this from super credible people is beyond count. Yet I tell you, there's people that put on conferences about Bigfoot saying there's nothing paranormal or unusual about them. They're just an ape or a gorilla. It's almost as though these people are paid to spew lies. Because how could anybody be a true researcher and say that they've actually read and researched all aspects of a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch and not read something paranormal or unusual? I'm sorry, it gets me mad. It gets me mad because there's a group of people out there that follow these people that think that they're apes and believe everything they say. Maybe if I hadn't personally seen some of this, I could pass it off. But you see, Angie and I have seen this. As I've said before, we've walked on a trail in Colorado. Snowed about 6 inches. We were the first people on the trail in the morning. And as we're hiking along, we see a trail coming off a left hill towards us, down to a river. Tracks are directly in line with each other. Tracks are huge, like a Bigfoot. And then they started in the middle of nowhere, and they ended in the middle of nowhere. And friends, I'm telling you the truth. Just like this man says, sometimes they make tracks, sometimes they don't. 2016, my wife and I were preparing to leave the cabin on a Sunday afternoon in late spring. We were in a hurry for some reason. My wife has a phobia with frogs. Wonderful seeing as we have a large wetland. Spring frogs' hatches have been drowning out all other sounds all weekend. I locked up the cabin and came out to see her staring towards the back of the cabin in the beaver pond. I asked what she was looking at, and she asked, "What does that sound?" I listened, and it was fairly close and loud. I noticed no frogs croaking at all. Key point, something's up. The only sound was this weird noise. It was similar to, but not exactly the same as, a deep guttural panting, but with a strange, disturbing rhythm. And it was as if it was directed to where we were standing, if that makes any sense at all. I moved slowly toward the back of the cabin, scanning the pond edges where I could see. Again, I could see the source location, but nothing was there. It continued, and something didn't feel right, and we left. I've never heard that since. Well, that's part 3 of Mike's letter. Riveting. Riveting. Great writing, great story, credible. I can validate everything Mike's saying. Most of it has happened to me. So, please share this letter far and wide. And thank you for being here. Mike talked about Tribal Bigfoot and the Hoopa Project. You can get those at our online store. That's NA, like North America, nabigfootsearch.com. Be safe. God's willing. I'll be back soon. Paulides out.